when somebody calls next to act, whatever position they're in, whether it's button versus low jack, or you're c-betting into 3 people from under the gun and they call on the flop in mid position with 2 people left to act behind them, the sheer fact that they're calling next to act with people left to act behind them usually is going to indicate that they have at least top pair or some sort of drop.
A look at downtown Reno as we welcome you in to vlog 205, listening to the latest episode of the Crush Live Poker Podcast. Very interesting episode this week, talking about spots to double barrel the turn, what you should look for and what factors should play into that. And that is a particularly helpful episode because, in all honesty, that's one of the most common scenarios you get into in live cash games, is when should you fire the turn and when should you not. If you saw the last vlog, then you are aware of the fact that we are in the middle of quite a tremendous upswing. And I was asked, with that extra cash, are you going to buy anything with it? And I am pleased to announce that the answer was yes. And I actually have that item of purchase right here. New hydro flask, the kind with the lid that comes up. You don't have to screw the entire damn thing off every time. Absolutely phenomenal purchase. What, you didn't think I needed a card, did you? I'd cruise down South Virginia Street into Peppermill at about 11 a.m. But before we tell you about the session that I played, how about a hand that occurred between Slick and the legendary Ms. T? There was $40 in the pot going to the river. No betting occurred until then, when she overbet jammed 10s full for 4 hockey pucks, and he ended up rivering the wheel and decided to snap call. In the history of poker, there probably haven't been too many $8,000 pots that happened with $40 in going into the last card. We also saw something that I'd never seen before. A player was put to the test for his whole stack, decided to call, and when asked about running it twice, the guy who did the shoving on the flop mucked his hand without even seeing the run out. I guess sometimes you just know that you're drawing dead, even though, given how long it took his opponent to call, he obviously didn't have a set, so chances are he was live to some runner-runner draws. So that was definitely a first. As for this day, I'd get into the poker room with the hope of being home at around 7 o'clock to watch hockey, despite it being the first day of the NCAA tournament and basketball being the sport of the day. By the way, am I the only one that just can't get into the tournament like I once could? Back in the days of Kevin Durant and Greg Oden, I could just watch any game of that tournament and be super into it, but nowadays, I barely even watch the Final Four. Anyway, I thought I was going to start out in beast mode when I raised pocket 10s and flopped a set on Queen Jack 10 out of the gate, but both my opponents snap-folded to my small flop bet. Then playing 6-handed, we get a limp. The cutoff raises to 35, and I have Ace-Jack of spades on the button and just call. The big blind calls, as does the limper, so with 140 in, the board comes out Queen Jack 5 rainbow. I'm expecting a bet out of the pre-flop raiser, but he doesn't make one, so it makes me wonder if I should bet second pair here. And after some deliberation about these two opponents, I decided to do that, betting 45. That was a bet that both of them decided to call, and with 275 in, the turn is the 6 of diamonds, and again, it gets checked to me. This probably should have been a check against two opponents, but I decided to bet once again, knowing that both are capable of being quite wide here. So I make it 50. First player folds, but the cutoff then announces 150. It became clear to me that he was probably slow playing a set. I fold my hand, and as you can see, he shows me that that indeed was the case. I didn't get dealt the best hand that one can pick up and faced a $35 open from a very aggressive player, which is why I decided to size up here and 3-bet to 125. Unfortunately, that proved to be way too large as he folded instantaneously. I then looked behind me to see that the University of Virginia has established itself as the absolute best when it comes to getting upset in the first round of the tournament. I've been dealt pocket 4s in a hand in which nothing happens. So why do I mention it? Because I just wanted to point out that one of the highlights of this recent upswing happened the day before, When I open folded fours under the gun 1, which, by the way, is what you're supposed to do with them, it ended up being a 4-way pot on ace 6-4 when one of them had ace 6 in a spot when the turn came another 6. So unless he would somehow find a hero fold on the flop with top 2 pair, which is unlikely, I would have lost a very big pot. Sometimes money saved is just as good as money earned. I would then do something that normally works well for me when I have a pretty good read on my opponent just having a medium pair, and that is draw to a straight, but represent the flush if it comes in. Turns out, I picked a bad spot for that, as I got snapped off on the river by a pair of 8s when I tried to do that exact thing. I would add on 500, and we'd get a couple of limps. The straddle was on my left in the hijack, and I'd pick up my favorite hand in the low jack and make it 60. And as you can see, 4 of these players call me. So with 315 in, the flop is queen 7 deuce 2 hearts. And when it was checked to me, I had to decide whether or not to bet. It was close, but given how loose this game was playing, 8s are going to be good here too often to just check. So I bet 80. My only caller is the big blind, which was the kind of result that I was expecting here. So with 475 in, the turn is an offsuit 9, and it gets checked through, as does the river, which is another brick, and he folds to no bet, saying that he had a flush draw that missed. The next hand is one that's going to be ripe for some second guessing. I have kings, middle position 2, and make it 40. Ms. T, back in action, decides to call, and with 85 in, the flop is king, queen, 7 rainbow, giving me top set. I think that most would agree that a big bet here would be pretty excessive, so I bet 35, trying to build up a pot, and she doesn't take too long before calling. So with 165 in, the turn is another queen, filling me up. If I had it to do over again, I would try to check raise here. But at the time, I figured she's going to have a lot of jack 10s, as well as some 7s that she wants to bluff catch with, and I figured that she'd raise if I bet and she actually has a queen. So with that in mind, I make it 60, and she barely thinks at all before calling. So with 285 in, the river is a 4. Not thinking she's going to have a queen here, I decided to bet 125 and get snap called. Creating a $535 pot, I show my hand, and she did have a queen. I didn't see the kicker, I'm guessing it wasn't all that strong, but either way I missed out on probably $1,000 worth of value if I really had gone for it in that spot. This is something that you'll see even with the most aggressive players nowadays. I pointed it out when Slick did the same kind of thing in a hand a couple of months ago, and that is just be super cautious with trips and a weak kicker, much more so now than in years past. We then get an absolute limp fest, and despite the fact that I only had 8-5 offsuit, I figured it was a good chance to punish them. Sometimes limping is pimping, but sometimes you've got to steal that money. I did get 2 callers, but got them both to fold when I bet $110 on a queen high board. I would then lose back $100 with queens, bet folding the turn when an ace hit, and then I'd get hot. I'd raise 10s, and Ms. T would give me action on both the flop and the turn on a 7-8-9 board, but she would snap fold the river when I made a thin value bet and front door diamonds didn't get there. That was followed by me picking up the 3-6 offsuit in the rock and asking Donnie the dealer to go ahead and put a couple of 6s on the flop, and I'll be damned if he didn't do just that. I didn't win a big pot, but I did get 1 street of value. I just thought it was funny, as apparently you sometimes just have to ask for what you want to see. This is a mid-session update. I believe, and I'm guessing you would support me on this, that the world would be a better place if the movie Top Gun Maverick didn't include that first scene where he goes Mach 10 and allegedly ejects out of that plane. Mach 10 is more than 7,600 miles per hour. It is absolutely ludicrous to indicate that he could have survived that. And that's the end of this update. I didn't want a small pot with aces, and as I was stacking those chips in the winner's straddle, I would look down at ace-king. We'd get a limp from a gentleman in some cowboy attire, and Ms. T completes in the big blind. I decide to make it 60 here. Both decide to give me action. So with 195 in, the flop is ace-king 10-2 spades, giving me top 2. The cowboy leads out for 80, with only a few hundred behind. After thinking about it, I decided to just min-raise this, hoping that he would jam the rest of his stack in over the top. Ms. T goes out, and he doesn't raise. He decides to just call. And with 355 in, the turn is the 8 of clubs, and he checks. I decide now, logically, to put him all in for his remaining 250 or so, and he doesn't take too long with it, and decides to make the call, creating an $870 pot. The river is the 9 of clubs, which doesn't matter, as he shows king-jack drawing dead to a queen, as he would saddle up and get on out of here. In my experience, that was about as big of a pot as ace-king is capable of winning. If you want a more typical example of what ace-king tends to do, I present this hand. Ms. T would limp under the gun, and I'd raise to 40 in the cutoff. She'd be my only caller. With 80 in, the flop is ace-queen deuce 2 hearts, and she checks. With top pair, top kicker, I bet 65, and she decides to snap call. So with 215 in, the turn is the 6 of hearts, bringing in that front door draw, and now she bets out for 250. This is a tricky spot. She's betting more than the pot here, but obviously we know what she's capable of. The one thing I know is that if she fires the turn and the river big, that I'm almost certainly beat. In this case, I figured it was a call that I still had to make, and with 715 in, the river changes nothing. I was expecting either a big bet or a check. Instead, I get the last thing I was expecting to see, and that is a small $210 bet, less than her turn bet. That ended up being the perfect sizing for her, as I decided to pay it off, creating an $1,135 pot, and she showed the skinny in the right suit. Deuce 3 of hearts, her flush, takes it. Sometimes ace-king giveth, most of the time ace-king taketh away. Speaking of which, about an hour later, we'd get one half of the double D's show up. Parenthetically, they would switch seats later on, as one of them wanted into the game and the other didn't want to play with the other one. But in this hand, he would demonstrate how he never really has run bad against me over the last 13 years of playing against each other, and that would not change. As I 3-bet ace-king and he called with pocket nines, and he flopped a set on a king-high board. Thankfully, a one-liner to a jack prevented me from losing much, as he just checked it to me on the turn and the river, and I stayed out of the trap. I didn't lose back about 400 flopping the nut flush draw and being up against a guy who I knew was either slow playing a full house or missed the same draw. There was absolutely zero question about that. I decided to call, hoping it was the second option. That was wrong. It was the first one. It should have been a fold either way, but I guess sometimes you just have to know. All right, no Kayla this week, so it's Bugsy Corner, something that the men were not as happy about, but the women much, much happier about. So you have successfully bet how many NCAA tournament games today?
7.
And how many are you winning?
All of them.
So what does that take to have that happen? What do you need to do?
Practice, man.
We're talking about practice.
Practice.
We then see an absolutely massive pot won by the aforementioned second member of the Double D's when he got action from 2 players when he had bottom set. I don't know what the hell they were giving him so much action with. I just know that I never would have given him that much action with whatever the hell they had. That is for damn sure. I did manage to bluff off about 400 against a tough player who had basically been taking a no set, no bet approach throughout the day. I really should have considered that when I ran that particular bluff. Definitely the stupidest play I made all day. Anyway, Mr. Z then sits down and limps under the gun. I have kings MP1, make it 40. We get a call from the hijack, and then under the gun, limp raises to 185, and this is not a play that he makes very often. The 2 most likely hands that he's going to have here are pocket aces and the skinny. Now, that is not a joke. So with that in mind, I just call. And with 425 in, the flop comes out 10-5-3, 2 clubs. And he fires 300. I don't see what option I have here other than calling. And with 1,025 in the pot, the turn is the 7 of hearts, and now he checks. Obviously, it's going to be kind of a disaster if I miss value from queens, but as I stated, I just don't see him taking this line with queens too often. I was actually trying to figure out if he would fire with the skinny here or not, given the fact that he has picked up outs against overpairs on that flop, but I was not sure. He's obviously not going to fold pocket aces, and if he is bluffing, he might continue doing so on the river. So I check it back, and the river is the 6 of diamonds. And now he comes out and fires 4 black chips into the pot, and I really wanted to lay this hand down here. But as you can imagine, especially against probably the most aggressive player in the history of Reno poker, I didn't do that. So it was a $1,825 pot, and he has exactly what I feared he was gonna have. It often seems like that's the way it goes in poker. You make a stupid mistake, like I made in that hand that, albeit I just kind of breezed over, but was one that stood out in my mind when I tried to bluff in a spot I never should, and then I got coolered. Usually seems like the mistake is then followed by run bad. If you're scoring at home, I had successfully turned a nearly $1,000 win into a nearly $1,000 loss. We then get a hand in which I make it 40 under the gun +1 with pocket nines. The button decides to 3-bet big to 150. I think about it for a second and call. And with 315 in, we get a board of 9-3-4 all diamonds, giving me top set, and I check it over to him. Button fires 175 here, and I waste absolutely no time, raising to 475. I certainly can't imagine that he's folding aces or kings with a diamond here, and after some thought, he does indeed make this call. And with 1,265 in, the turn is a slightly above average card for me. Now with no chance to lose against a very tough player who will definitely think this hand through, I opt to slow play it and try to throw him off, making sure the rest of this money goes in. And sure enough, he bites, firing 650 into the pot. I waste no time jamming all in for only about 200 more. Obviously, he's going to snap call. That creates a $2,950 pot. Since I jammed all in and he called, I knew that I was first to show, and that's what I did. Unfortunately, that would result in me not getting a look at what he had, but I think it's pretty clear that he had an overpair with or without a diamond in that spot. As I got to the end of the session, Slick would sit down, and on his first hand, opens 110 under the gun. He put on a typical show, like he likes to do. Cautious of this Hollywooding, I decided to just call with jacks. A king-high board slowed him down. I really wish I had taken the opportunity to try to turn my hand into a bluff, but I didn't do it. I ended up actually trying to make a thin value bet on the river after he just continued to check it to me, and I just lost $65 more when I ended up value owning myself to his pocket queens. I'd play until about 8:45 p.m., so I'd get a late start on watching the hockey game I wanted to see, but that's why I have DVR. I'd pocket the 2 hockey pucks, rack up, and book the win. All right, well, first of all, I just did something that I try never to do, and I picked a terrible spot to do it. I basically announced that I was leaving shortly, and the reason that I try never to do that is because whether or not it's ever actually a possibility, I'm convinced there are some guys that will use that as an excuse to put you to the test, knowing you don't want to play a big pot on your way out the door. Now, whether or not they're actually doing that, I don't know, but if I just hadn't said anything, I'd know that that wasn't what it was. And I didn't show the hand on the vlog because I don't want this guy to know what I folded. So I lost $375 or so as a result, possibly, of me saying I was leaving. The other possibility is that he actually had a huge hand and I made a great fold, but I don't know. As far as the session itself, a roller coaster ride, up and down. It could have been an epic day. All told, a $248 win. Not exactly what I had in mind going into a day where I'd win a $3,000 pot with quads, but I'll take what I can get. I think it's only been, now because I've played more hands against Mr. Z than any other player in poker, and there's been remarkably few aces against kings encounters between him and I. I believe that is only the third one over the years, and I think now I've had the kings twice and the aces once. So, didn't lose the maximum in that hand, but lost about 900 or so in a spot where I felt that's what I was up against. All right, the second edition of the Peppermill Poker Palooza is coming up April 7th through the 17th. And there's a lot of guaranteed money to be given away. $800,000 total over the course of 33 tournaments and $300,000 in just the main event itself. That's a pretty big guarantee for Reno, Nevada. And the Peppermill, and a lot of you may not realize this, but the Peppermill will guarantee the guarantees. What a concept, right? It's something that not every casino in this town has adhered to over the years. Other casinos have canceled tournaments because they failed to hit their guarantee. So even if the Peppermill is going to lose money on the deal, they realize it's the smarter play to still give the money away to the players. So keep that in mind if you consider coming out for this Poker Palooza, something that has earned the reputation, rightfully so, of being just one of the most fun tournament series in all of poker. I mean, you can play cornhole to add on to your winnings in certain spots too. I think it was actually my drone guy, Chris Brunswald, who made those cornhole things for the Poker Palooza. Anyway, they're going to kick things off with the $550 mini main event, 120K guarantee. Then they go into the mystery bounty shortly after that. That's also a $550 buy-in with a 10K top bounty prize. Those mystery bounty tournaments gaining a lot of popularity in the poker world, and the Peppermill is also going to have one. So you'll be able to take part in that. April 7th through the 17th, book your stay, because if you want to come to this thing, the Peppermill, trust me, obviously that's where you want to stay, be around all the action, be around there for the great cash games, and you can get a discount as a result of this vlog. Use promo code DEACH23 at checkout to get 20% off your stay for this running of the Peppermill Poker Palooza. Not as good of a day as it could have been for this vlog as a result of that Aces against Kings cooler against Mr. Z, but what can I say? Things still going incredibly well of late. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you back here next time where hopefully we can keep this rolling.
I've got an itch I can't scratch, I'm missing a piece that completes a whole part of me, an open wound scar to see. Everybody come here, gather round, welcome to the freak show, the best in town. What the hell's wrong with me? I don't get along with anybody, honestly. I've been living in my own head constantly, thoughts jumbled around, think I need a new lobotomy. Wait, all these thoughts are too negative. I don't wanna get lost in the sedative. Gotta show them what I got, I'm competitive. You know I'm about to go off, I won't let them win, I'll take a stab. I wanna chase a bag, I wanna weigh, I can change all the things I let